Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Bite-Sized Podcast. I'm your host, Clayton at ClatesAFC on Twitter, here to do something a little bit different today. It's a fantasy football podcast, and I think it's probably the first solo fantasy football pod we've done on this Arsenal channel. So if you're new to the channel, yeah, we are an Arsenal channel, but today we're discussing all things Martin Ødegaard. Well, we're not discussing Martin Ødegaard, we're discussing what it means to be without Martin Ødegaard for the next few fixtures. It's something that within the fantasy football community, there's a lot of debate and discussion around the topic and what impact that may have on the rest of Arsenal's fantasy football assets. And I've been getting quite a lot of questions around it. So I thought it would be easier to do a little podcast on it rather than brain dump my thoughts in a thread on Twitter. So I've got to start this. I feel like there's lots of different ways to take this. So obviously we've played 3 games now this season without Odegaard, and they were against Spurs away, Atalanta away, and Man City away. And the first thing I said was, I just don't think we should read too much into or over-index on what we see in those games, because I think they're very unique situations and game states and opposition that Arsenal were up against that isn't indicative of what I think Arsenal will do and face going forward. So like now, Arsenal have Leicester at home, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away. Granted, there's a Champions League game there in between, which is PSG at home, Bolton in the EFL Cup. So probably not worth reading into that, to be fair. But I do think there's teams like Tottenham, Atalanta, and Man City, where especially when you play away, you know Arsenal are going to have less of the ball. More in the Spurs and City games. Obviously, game state affected the Man City one massively once Arsenal went down to 10 men. But I look at them as a group of games and opposition, and then I look at Leicester, Southampton, Bournemouth as one where Arsenal will have a lot more of the ball. And yeah, I think it will be a completely different game. And I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but where I'll start is I don't usually like doing this sort of stuff, but there's a cool little graphic on the Premier League's website, and it's the stats on Arsenal with and without Odegaard. And as much as I don't like stuff like this, I know there's a lot of people that do value data like this. The reason I don't like it is, so this table I'm looking at in front of me has got the stats for Arsenal with Odegaard starting, which is 116 matches, and then versus without Odegaard starting, which is 20 games. And I just think the sample size there of like 116 versus 20, it's such a discrepancy. And I always think, especially in a smaller sample size of like 20 games, you'd have to look at such you'd have to look in so much more detail, I think, in my opinion, to draw conclusions, because the type of opposition, the game state and all of those things, what other personnel were available in Odegaard's absence. Obviously, over the duration of his time here, he's played in different levels of quality in terms of, the level of the Arsenal teams he's been in. So I personally don't like tables like that. And I know Rodri was another one. People used to kind of talk about that with and without Rodri, and Onana at Everton was another one. And I just think there's so many factors to it than just simply this is the binary view of with and without. But like I said, that's my personal opinion. I know a lot of people value that stuff, so I thought, let me read it out. It's on topic. So the stats with Odegaard are 116 matches and a win percentage of 66.4. In the 20 matches without him, this does drop to 55%. The points per 90 with Odegaard starting is 2.1, and the points per 90 without Odegaard starting are 1.8. Shots per 90 with 15.9, without 13. Possession with 56.5, without 55. Passes into the final third with 60.4, without 59. Passing accuracy in the final third with 77.2, without 76.8, and passing accuracy in the opposition half with 81 and without 81.1. So yeah, I think you'll probably already be drawing your own conclusions from that. But I think you can see from there why I just think there's so many more layers to it. It's not that simple. Like the possession kind of with and without him, it's minimal difference. Win percentage is obviously big. Points per 90, slightly less. Shots per 90, slightly less. All of the other metrics of passes into the final third, accuracy, slightly less. And passing accuracy in the opposition half is 0.1% more. So for those of you that enjoy that stuff, there you are. I want to talk tactics. Those of you that know me know I love to nerd out on this sort of stuff. And when I think of Arsenal without Martin Ødegaard, I've already touched on this before. I think of three stages of Odegaard. Sorry, not three stages of Odegaard. Three key bits of a football game Odegaard contributes to. The first one, and in no particular order, it's just the three things I think that come to my head when I think of what he brings to the team. The first one is outstanding creativity, and of course his ability to play passes in the final third, the kind of traditional number 10 creative playmaking ability. Even though he plays as more of a number 8, he has got that kind of eye for a pass, can thread it through the needle. His ability to manipulate the ball in tight spaces in the final third, create angles to open up pockets for people, that is second to none. I don't think you can replace that. I don't think you can replace that with a like-for-like profile, but I think you can tweak things to arrive into areas in a different method, which I'll talk about later. The second is his pressing off the ball work. He obviously instigates the press off the ball in a 4-4-2, him and Havertz at the front, and he really smartly kind of creates an angle where the keeper will have the ball, and he leaves himself a lot of ground to cover for the left centre back usually, but he's really smart in the way he does it. So second is off the ball work. I think we've shown in this last week, again, small sample size, but I did think if there were any games to miss Martin Ødegaard in and still be able to be successful, it was the likes of Tottenham and City away, because in my opinion, those are the games where not every team. For Arsenal, we were best suited to defending deep, defending in the low to mid block, and when you regain the ball, going very direct, like back to front in seconds. I think the Atalanta Arsenal tried to control the ball a little bit more in the middle third when we did regain it, but games like Tottenham and City away, I think it's a case of you just go back to front as fast and direct as you can. And yeah, as a result, that kind of off the ball shape, I think Arsenal replaced really well. So off the ball, as much as that's one of his biggest strengths, I'm not too concerned about that, because I do think you can replace that systematically and with other intelligent players as well. The third one is probably one of the most interesting ones. It's particularly against opposition like Leicester, Southampton, like with respect, the kind of lower half Premier League teams, Odegaard, and not just lower half teams that typically come to the Emirates and deploy like a low block or park the bus, like Arsenal do in some stages. Odegaard typically will drop deep and facilitate quite a lot of the play and build up. And it's really smart because what he does is he draws people away. He then creates space for himself to arrive in the final third. His timing of the run is impeccable. But what he's doing in that third area of the game is he's facilitating. He's typically assisting in the build-up. He's controlling the tempo of the game. And this is something I think you can replace alternatively as well. And like, I know I haven't necessarily touched on what does this mean for Havertz? What does this mean for the defense yet? I'm coming onto it. But I just wanted to outline those three things because they're the things that I think inform my thought processes on what I actually think it means for Arsenal FPL assets. I touched on the first one. Like, you can't replace him in the final third. I'm sure, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure I saw some stats about his like chance creation, passes into the final third, all of that typical playmaking stuff. Like, it's the best at Arsenal and you can't replace that. But what I think you can do is I think you can tweak things systematically to, like I said, arrive in different areas. So one of the most common ways Arsenal build up an attack, typically when everyone's fit, is there's a nice triangle on the right-hand side. There's a pod of typically White, Odegaard, and Saka. And between the three of them, you've always got someone occupying completely out wide on like the kind of right wing area. You've always got someone occupying the half space in between the central midfield and the winger. And then you've always got someone that's operating more centrally close to the midfield. And that's typically like Ben White sometimes. He did this a lot last year when we were playing Kivior at left back, where Zinchenko usually inverts. We flipped the dynamic, and it was actually White inverting from right back. Odegaard was in the kind of right 8 half space. Saka was right wing. But the three of them would continuously rotate, but they would all maintain that positional structure. So even though it's on paper, White inverted fullback, Odegaard as the 8, Saka as the right winger, sometimes you would see White in the half space, Odegaard next to the midfield, in that kind of inverted right back role, Saka maintaining the width and vice versa. And it was constantly rotating. I think without Odegaard at Arsenal in these games, and again, I'm stressing what I'm predicting will happen going forward rather than reading into the Spurs and City games. I think Arsenal will really miss that connective, his connectivity, his ability to combine, to build pods, build relationships. And I think, of course, it's a net negative for Arsenal in these games. I think there will be an element of Arsenal perhaps struggling on the ball to break down teams. Maybe not aesthetically on the eye as free-flowing as we're used to against these types of opponents. But I think there's a solution to it. And what I think is going to happen is Arsenal typically build up in a 3-2. And you hear a lot of people and pundits talking about like the top teams now defending with a 5, attacking with a 5. Arsenal's first 5 is usually, let's just say, a Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel as the 3. And then it's one of the whoever's the number 6 in the team, whether it's Declan Rice, Partey, or Jorginho, and then the left back will typically invert. Against Everton last season, the final day of the season, Timber came on, and I can't remember if Zinchenko came on or he started, but we ended the game in a 2-3, where it was Saliba, Gabriel, and then it was one of the it was the number 6. I can't remember who it was in that game, but it was Timber and Zinchenko either side of him. And I think we're going to see Arsenal build up in more of a 2-3 than a 3-2 without Odegaard against the likes of Leicester, Southampton, and Bournemouth. And the reason I think that is when you build in a 3-2, you're playing a line deeper. So quite often, like against Aston Villa, Arsenal were very patient with moving it side to side from White to Saliba, Saliba to Gabriel, Gabriel to Saliba, Saliba to White, and so on. But you're playing closer to your goal, right? And I'm exaggerating that. It's not dangerous, but you're playing a line deeper. I think when you move that line higher and it's a 2-3, you're then occupying different spaces and it brings different angles. And this is why I've been really vocal on, I think Jurriën Timber, I know Ben White had a knock and the plan wasn't for him to play against Man City. I had a sneaky feeling that Timber right back, Calafiori left back was going to be a thing we saw anyway going forward, because then I think it gives Arsenal the ability, and it's the profiles and the attributes of what Timber and Calafiori bring as well that enables Arsenal to build up slightly differently. If you've got Saliba and Gabriel as the 2, and then a Timber number 6, where there's Partey, Jorginho, and Calafiori, you've then got, if you look at those fullbacks, Zinchenko is a high volume ball progressor, right? But that's that he's high touch, high volume, but it often enables teams to settle into a shape because it's kind of got its studs on the ball. You're not really causing any disruption. You're moving it side to side. With a Calafiori, he is so positionally free, and he's a little bit unusual in the way he operates with, like, he brings a little bit of chaos. And again, I've watched a lot of him when Arsenal signed him, so I'm not just talking about the Man City game, but even Atalanta when he came on. I think his biggest strength, which we'll see with Arsenal, is his ability to carry and drive through the lines, and I think that is a solution to unlocking deep blocks as opposed to just passing. I think carrying usually attracts people towards you and then it frees up someone else elsewhere. I think that's what we'll see with Calafiori on the left. And Timber is a different profile to White. White, when he was inverting from right back and when he often finds himself in midfield, similar to Tomiyasu, it's more of an off-the-ball decoy to attract people to them, to create space for someone else who's better on the ball elsewhere. You wouldn't see Arsenal ever really progressing the ball through a Ben White or a Tomiyasu when they're in those areas. They're more there to decoy. With Jurian Timber, as much as he's not a high volume passer, he again is very comfortable carrying, and I think he's very press resistant as well. So what that then enables is when I speak about the kind of 3-2 versus the 2-3 and being a line higher, with a Jurian Timber being part of the three higher up one line, that's almost closer to playing in the pockets that Odegaard would play in. And I think he is a player that he can go on both feet. He's got the ability to drop a shoulder, create a different angle. And I think that will be Arsenal's solution without Odegaard, to have more of a 2-3 build up, have a different profile left back in Calafiori, have a different profile right back in Jurian Timber, which gives you something different in the way that Arsenal arrive into the middle and final thirds, which again, like I said, you can't with Martin Ødegaard. Now, there's a chance he does just go, he being Mikel Arteta, in the kind of normal style system formation. Let's just call it a 4-3-3. One of the sixes, a left eight, a right eight, and the right eight could be Ethan Nwaneri, who profile-wise on the ball is probably the most similar to Odegaard in the team. Arsenal play Bolton in the EFL Cup on Wednesday, and I think Nwaneri will start in that. And of course, if he absolutely shines, there's a chance he plays against Leicester. I just think I'd be surprised. I still think last season, obviously the landscape was different, but Odegaard missed a couple of games, and I can't remember for the life of me what they were. I feel like it was around maybe October, November time. I'd be able to find it if I had it in front of me. But in that period, I remember when Odegaard was out, Smith Rowe played one of them. I want to say it was like Sheffield United at home. Obviously, we don't have Smith Rowe anymore, but there was one game that Odegaard wasn't there, and it was Kai Havertz that actually played as the right eight. And I think it was Leandro Trossard that played as like the false nine up top. And I think that's what Arteta's going to go with. I think on paper, it will still be like your 4-3-3, but obviously there's nuances in the build up and the 2-3 versus the 3-2, like I said. But I've spoken about the first five. If you look at the second five in that, let's just say the lineup is Raya, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori. Let's go with Partey, Rice, and Havertz, and then Saka, Trossard, or Jesus, and let's just say Martinelli for the sake of this conversation. People will hear that and think, oh, Havertz is not going to play as a centre forward, as an out-and-out number 9, and you're right. But in that formation, in that system last year, the fluidity between, I think it was Trossard at the time, and Havertz at the right eight was so seamless that Havertz was still attacking the centre forward areas. Sure, he wasn't that kind of fixed presence up top, which I think historically, like when you're thinking about a number 9, that's what you think of. But he still had enough chances, and Arsenal was still creating the chances to get him into the good goal scoring opportunities and the good goal scoring areas, that it doesn't become a concern for me personally. So I think that's what he'll do. I think there is a chance when Nwaneri obviously gets the shirt, and if he does that, Havertz stays as the typical number 9. And of course, that's slightly better for him. I must say, as much as I don't think it's a huge concern, I do think it's a slight negative on Havertz, because naturally, as much as he'll still be getting into the right areas, he's not going to be playing as many minutes as a fixed number 9. But yeah, I think that's one solution, going with Nwaneri. But I really think he's going to go with that kind of Trossard Jesus profile as the false 9, Havertz on the right as the 8, but really fluid, consistently interchanging and drawing opponents out. If you think of Trossard, Jesus, they like to drop deep, get on the ball, facilitate. Havertz is a very off the ball player. He likes to attack space, run into space, and 1-2 touches here, there. Trossard, Jesus, they're high volume touch players. So that's what I think he'll go with. And the other thing I wanted to touch on there in terms of the 5-5 is whether it's a 2-3 or a 3-2, the attacking 5 are all going to be attacking the box. And again, it's like trying to change the way you think about things in terms of, are they just a traditional number 9 and this and that? They're playing in a team that is still going to create chances, and they will still be attacking the areas in the most dangerous areas as well. So, of course, overall, if Havertz does end up playing as that right-sided 8, then as much as I'm saying it's a fluid concept and the interchanging with Jesus Trossard will happen, of course, it's a slight negative, but I must emphasize like the slight on that. But yeah, I just think he's still going to get himself into enough areas where Arsenal create chances. Now, the other side of that is obviously Arsenal have PSG midweek in between Leicester, Southampton. So rotation is the next question that a lot of people are asking about. Arsenal play against Leicester on Saturday, 3:00. It's then PSG Tuesday and then Southampton the following Saturday. So fairly decent spacing. I think what's going to happen is I don't think there'll be rotation in terms of like the starting 11. I think it'll be first choice starting 11 in all 3 games. And I think Arteta will just look to maybe do 1 or 2 changes in the back line, maybe midfield, depending on energy levels. Maybe switch Jesus Trossard in between the 3 games, Sterling, Martinelli, that sort of stuff. But I think it will be a case of start the game strong, try and get the result done early, and then take the likes of Saka off so he can get a bit of a rest. And Twisted Sparky 06 is in the chat with a good comment. So with Trossard also out, will Sterling come in and play that role? And this is the thing. So Trossard actually serves his 1-match suspension against Bolton in the EFL Cup. So he will be available for selection against Leicester. So I need to do more homework on like historically what has Arteta done when players get sent off. I don't know if he's the sort of guy that punishes them or just puts them straight back in. So I need to do more homework on that. But the key message there is Trossard will be available for selection. In terms of a lot of that was tactical. In terms of like the high level, what does that mean for FPL assets? Defensively, Arsenal have shown systematically they are elite. I would not be concerned. If Arsenal concede across this period of Leicester, Southampton, Bournemouth without Odegaard, it's not because of Odegaard's absence, in my opinion. It's just like there'll be a bozo moment or fair play, the opposition have created an opportunity. I don't think that is a concern. So if you're wondering about what game week are we in? What, 5, 6? Whatever game week we're in. If you're worried about your wild cards and no Odegaard putting you off the defense, I would not let that bother you. Game week 6 wild card is if you want to go triple defense, want to go double defense, go for it. On the offensive side of things, I think there will be a slight drop off. If I'm being honest, I think perhaps if Odegaard was there, the ability to sustain pressure in the final third would be different. And I think the ability to sustainably create chances, I think Arsenal will look slightly more direct in the final third, which probably isn't a bad thing. But I think with Odegaard there, it's like the ball goes into him and it just sticks. I mean, it's constantly recycled. If teams regain the ball, we regain it back straight away. And it's like that constant pressure valve in the final third. I think that's where Arsenal might look to perhaps, well, not look to struggle, but I think Arsenal will perhaps struggle a little bit. I think that they'll still have more than enough to create enough to win the 3 games fairly comfortably, but it probably won't be the 5-6-0s that I probably would have been predicting had he been available. So, yeah. Another thing I mentioned earlier about the kind of controlling in the first phase, that for me is a simple fix. Without Odegaard, you just play a Zinchenko or Jorginho. I think Thomas Partey is someone that's quite an aggressive puncher of the ball, plays it through lines, takes it on the half turn. Or Jorginho, again, high touch, high volume, getting the theme here. So that was quite a lot to take, to discuss, but yeah, lots of thoughts on it. I think there's lots of different ways Arsenal can approach this without Odegaard, but I still think the too long didn't listen is defensively won't affect the thing. Offensively, I think it will be a slight negative impact, but still not enough for me to be able to put people off going for the likes of Saka, Havertz, etc. I did obviously tweet out and I posted in Planet FPL's Patreon. So I had a couple of questions. So Chris Teller said, won't be able to catch this live because of work. My question is, for someone who already has Raya and Saka, who would you recommend as the third Arsenal asset between Havertz, Saliba, and Gabriel? Leaning towards Gabriel at the moment, thanks to Jova doing wonders for our set piece threat. So I think this depends on like your long-term strategy. If you're someone that is looking to hold the wild card for long and probably minimize the amount of transfers you are able to do, you probably will opt for the double defense in terms of, so yeah, you've got Raya and Saka already, so you'd probably add a Gabriel to that, to be honest. I think clean sheets are, yeah, don't really need to add any conversation on the clean sheets and what's expected there. I do think, though, that as much as I'm saying offensively, there'll be a slight negative impact in the upcoming weeks. I do think Arsenal are absolutely capable of going and scoring a few in these games. I think there is a chance they may take their foot off the pedal if they do go 2-3-0 up against Leicester with PSG on the horizon. But I do think it's one of those. For those that are sat there with Havertz already, I think they're laughing, because I think the majority, myself included, would probably opt for the double defense just because it's safe, it's secure. Arsenal, must say, actually, after the run of Leicester, Southampton, and Bournemouth, then do have Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, and Chelsea away. So it's a nice 3 followed by a tough 3 before they turn again. So if you do opt for the kind of double attack, you probably do want to come off one. So it's dependent on your team structure and if you're able to kind of plan in those transfers and if you're happy to plan those transfers. And some people might even want to run with it. But yeah, my personal opinion is I'll give two opinions. If you're a risk chaser, if you're an upside chaser, I would absolutely be going double attack, because I think there's goals to be had in games. But with the knowledge that you probably want to come off and change that to double defense for the tougher fixtures, because I've said this many times, I think Arsenal are fixture proof defensively, despite the fact I've benched Gabriel 2 game weeks in a row. Next question was from Andrew Grandin. On wildcard and looking at the defensive triple up, Raya for sure, Gabriel for best set piece threat, White for best open play threat was the plan until yesterday's benching. What's the best one for security on minutes and attacking potential beyond Gabriel? So I think security on minutes, the obvious one is Saliba. Do you know what? James from Planet FPL made a good point on the main pod today. Like, it wouldn't surprise me as well if Gabriel's used as the decoy in a couple of games now, and Saliba's the one that attacks the ball and gets a goal. But yes, to answer that question, absolutely Saliba. I feel higher and more confident on Calafiori's minutes than I think most people will, but I still wouldn't advise people to go there just because if he ever returns, Tomiyasu, Zinchenko, Ben White there, Timber, I just think there's too many options in the fullback areas. And as much as I do think Calafiori will probably play 70-80% of the games, there will be the odd pointer in there, which I just think you probably won't get with the centre-backs. And if you look at the set-piece threat, it's absolutely bonkers. So again, it's a little bit one on personal play style. Like, if you like to have a bit of fun with it, I wouldn't talk you out of Calafiori. I'd just give you the caveat of I do think he'll miss out on the odd couple of games. But if you just want that kind of security, and like you said, security on minutes, then Saliba. That was it in terms of questions and general thoughts. So yeah, appreciate it. It was a little bit different. I just had quite a lot of kind of tactical thoughts around how I think Arsenal will set up without Odegaard in the upcoming games, given that it's different types of opponents to the ones we've seen in the last week. And like I said earlier, the kind of too long didn't listen if you're just tuning in now is I think defensively, Arsenal will still be structurally elite. If they score, it will just be a case of the opposition have absolutely done something magical or brilliant, or there's a lapse in concentration, things you can't really control. Basically nothing to do with Odegaard not being there, in my opinion. On the ball, I do think Arsenal may struggle to break down some of the deep blocks coming up, and I do think overall chance creation may be less fluid and less consistent. But I think you'll see a slight tweak in Arsenal's approach where they become a little bit more of a more efficient and ruthless final third, as opposed to a lot of the kind of pretty 1-2s combinations in the final third. But I do think you'll see a systematic tweak of moving from a build up of a 3-2 to a 2-3, and a Timber operating in a one line higher, a Calafiori operating one line higher with different instructions, where Calafiori is given the license to drive and carry, and Timber's there occupying half spaces to attract people. And the one thing with him as well is he's very comfortable on the ball in tight spaces as well. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. But I guess my final point before I get out of here is just to echo what Clive from the Arsenal Vision podcast said. He's made a really good point. If you look at the Arsenal identity with Odegaard versus the Arsenal identity without Odegaard, it almost feels like the Arsenal identity without Odegaard is a Kai Havertz team. And the identity with Odegaard is obviously lots of touches, lots of combinations, kind of that Arsenal 2008 onwards period where it's just like lots of pretty football. But I think the Havertz identity of this Arsenal team when Odegaard isn't in the team is more direct. It's more ruthless. It's more, yeah, that's it really, direct and ruthless. And I think you'll see a level of efficiency from Arsenal without Odegaard. It probably won't be the most aesthetic. I still think there'll be periods of really nice football and combination play, but be stained without him. So yeah, be interesting to watch, but I'm still very comfortable and confident in all assets. If I had to hedge my bets, again, it depends on your play style. I'm personally someone that likes to have a little, as much as I love like minute security and stuff when it's my own team, I like to kind of chase the goals, and I think there'll be goals in this period. So I probably personally would look to, I've got Gabriel and Saka in my team. I'm probably looking to add Havertz to that, and then switch that to maybe a Raya. So I'll go double defense for that tougher period onwards. But this period coming up for the next week, I think there's some fun for Arsenal to be had there. So yeah, give me some feedback, what you thought on this. Yeah, a bit different to the usual. And for the regular listeners, I'll be back tomorrow to preview the EFL Cup game against Bolton. For anyone that's new here and happens to be an Arsenal fan, not just here for the fantasy football side of things, my co-host is Nima, and we do match previews every Friday where we do like tactical matchups, score predictions, predicted lineups, all of that good stuff. And then we review the games on a Sunday where we do tactical reviews and kind of talk through all the key moments. And then I tend to do ad hoc topics like this as and when they're topical, and I'll always do like Champions League solo previews and reviews as well. So if you like the sound of that, consider dropping the channel description so you don't miss future content. But thanks for tuning in, thanks for the questions, and feedback welcome on this. Up the Arsenal.